It wasn't until I started really digging into the car and fixing things and doing things with the car that it really started to kind of hit me, you know? Um, I remember when we found out the motor was locked up, I was pretty bummed out about that because, I mean, yes, it's pretty illogical. The car's been sitting since the mid 70s. I didn't know what I was thinking, but I was really hoping we could save the motor or something, you know? It had like I said, a 283 V8 that had been swapped into it, but it still had its original 3-speed on the column. And I remember thinking, okay, we'll put a new motor in it, we'll keep the transmission. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the transmission didn't end up being good either, or at least we didn't want to use it, whatever the situation was. And so we yanked those out. So now I got even more discouraged on the project because I had a completely stripped out vehicle, no interior, mismatched wheels and tires, no tires that were actually good tires, no engine, and no trans. It kind of bums you out, you know? I literally had a shell of a car. But it was actually at that point that I started to really envision my car, my way, how I want the car to be. All of a sudden started showing chunks in the valve covers, or in the heads, right below the valve covers. It started showing some sparkly metal. And to this day, we still don't know exactly what happened. We think the cam might have actually taken a dump because it started to run really bad. It's a long story. The motor ended up being a mess. Anyways, so we got that motor, we cleaned that one up, we put that motor in, and I remember thinking, all right, cool, I'm going to finally have a running driving car. At that time, we didn't have a trans for the car, so we borrowed one of my dad's 4-speed transmissions for the car. So actually, the first video I ever have of my car running and driving is it with a 4-speed transmission out of my dad's car. I still remember the day that I first recorded it, like running for the first time. The car was an absolute wreck. Like I said, no interior, nothing, mismatched wheels and tires. In the video, you could see that the nose of the car sitting way up in the air because we had it jacked up because we were working on it. It had just headers on it, no other exhaust, just open headers. We had a battery sitting on the ground right next to the fuel tank sitting on the ground. Like literally it was a 5-gallon gas can. And we had them like right next to each other. We had wires coming right off the motor just straight down to the battery and a fuel hose coming straight down to the fuel tank. But it was just the bare minimum just so I could hear that car run. It was really funny to see that because to anybody else, you think, oh my God, that is so dangerous. But to me, I was like, this is my car becoming my car. This is the start of my car, And you can't really see it that much in the video, but I remember that day I'm holding the phone just shaking because I'm so excited, This is my first car, and this is my first V8 muscle car, That's like every teenage boy's dream, And at the time, I think I might have still been 16 at the time that we first got it started, because I think it was the very end of 2019 that we really got it started, and I think we got it driving right before my birthday in 2020, because I remember telling my dad that's really all I wanted for my birthday was to be able to drive my car for the first time. Maybe not even me driving, just have it be driving, which is why we ended up putting that 4-speed trans in it, is just because it was the quickest thing we had to be able to get the car mobile at the very least. There's a lot of work kind of done in between those 2 points, miscellaneous things. I started gathering interior components, or I started like one of the things I did is I took all the steel wheels on the car, I sanded them all down, painted them like a matte black, and then we got some new tires for them. Thankfully, because the wheels are 13-inch wheels, tires are super cheap. Able to get a set of 4 13-inch tires for like $300. It was amazing. But, just doing the small details here and there. I think it might have been while we still had the junk motor in it. I call it the junk motor because I'm still upset about that. It was told to be a good running driving motor like every other motor you hear. But whatever, I'm not going to get into that. We still had the junk motor in it, is I think when we first lowered the front of the car. And I remember being so excited because like my dad was like, all right, we're going to go lower the car. And I remember thinking, wait, really? We're actually going to do that? Because at the time, it was a stock height station wagon. To be completely honest, it looked terrible. Stock height station wagon does not work together, especially when it's making rowdy V8 noises. Stock height doesn't look right. I remember when we first dropped the front of that car, dude, I was ecstatic. I remember walking over to the front of it, and like the top of the hood was just barely above my knees. And I remember thinking, wow, this is low. Like, I don't know how I'm going to drive this. And I was so freaking excited for it. It was pretty funny, you know? It was funny to see it because, again, it's a station wagon, and you don't really expect them to be lowered, but anyways, it's still my style. I remember everybody was kind of helping me out. It's hard to explain what I mean by that, but my dad, our buddy Greg, and our buddy David, they poured everything they had into helping me get this car running. Their resources, their extra parts, their extra time, everything. Because, and this is from what they've told me, they saw a younger version of themselves in me, a 16-year-old teenager with his very first V8 muscle car, and they wanted me to have that experience of being able to drive his very own classic car, you know? And they saw that younger version of themselves, that excited, just loving fast, loud cars. They saw that in me. And so they poured everything they had into helping me. Greg got me a temporary seat for the front of the car. You know, I got parts from David. I got some interior parts from our buddy David, like the radio that I still have in this car that actually works, mind you. An original 1962 radio that still works. I got that from David. I got just parts and pieces from everybody. But the biggest contributor was my dad. My dad actually started to take parts off of his car. Mind you, he wasn't running at the time, but still take parts off of his car that he had gathered for his car and gave them to me to get my car running. The first aluminum radiator that I had in the car was originally for my dad's car. The electric fans were originally for my dad's car. A lot of the exhaust even. The exhaust on my car that I ran for the longest time was literally my dad's exhaust. So he gave up a lot of his car to get mine running. And that showed, because you get a little bit later, mid-2020, I'm driving this car daily. Like, registered, running, driving vehicle. I remember we wake up early one morning. We had been doing tons of testing and all this stuff with my car. We had already swapped out the motor at this point. I glaze over that because it really wasn't that big of a deal. It's just a motor swap. We do it in a couple days. It's not that difficult. The motor was trash. We had to take it out, had to put a new one in. Whatever. It is what it is. Same idea. It's a small block Chevy 350. I've always ran a 350 in this car. That's all I've ever gotten, but that's because they're a dime a dozen. We wake up early one morning. It's freezing cold outside. Car has no heater, of course, because why not? Or why would it? I mean, it's a muscle car. It doesn't need a heater. You're not here for the comfort. You're here for the loudness and fastness, you know? Anyways, we hop in the car. I'm bundled up because I'm freezing. I don't even have a license at this point. Like, I'm still on my permit, I think. But my dad takes me and him way early in the morning. We drive over to the DMV, and we wait in line for a couple hours, mind you, because we got to the DMV a couple hours before it opened, so we would be first in line. And we sat there, and I remember thinking, I'm going to freeze to death out here, because it was cold. But it was so freaking worth it, because by the end of it, I remember the lady telling me, all right, you know, here's the title for your car. And I remember thinking, I am now 16 years old, and my name is on the title of this car. I actually, before I had even technically finished paying it off to our buddy Greg, literally had my title, or my name on the title of this car, which, let me just tell you, is an incredible feeling. And it really just kicked me into gear with this car. Like, I just took off after that. I drove the car everywhere that I could. It was super rough when I first started driving it. I had just bare metal floors, no insulation, no carpeting. I had the seat cover. I had the back seat, no headliner. None of the door seals or window seals, none of them were good. The windshield leaks in like 5 places, and it leaks on you while you're driving. You actually get more wet in the car in the rain than you do if you were standing outside of the car. So it was bad. No heater, no AC, barely okay-ish brakes. I'm just going to admit they're 4-wheel drum brakes. They're not amazing, but whatever. It's all right. And But I didn't care. This was my car. I drove it as often as I possibly could, which, let's be honest, probably wasn't the best idea because I ran out of gas often, I broke down often. The car, I beat the crud out of the car. But it was my car. I was driving a 1962 Chevy Nova station wagon with a V8. And it was lowered. Like, how could it possibly get better? Now that I do think about it, I forgot to tell you, eventually we did get an automatic transmission for the car. Directly after the 4-speed, we got an automatic trans for it. And that one immediately, we put it in. I was like, yes, I finally get to drive the car. Because it's an automatic. Yeah, I'm sorry, don't hate me. I don't know how to drive manual. Anyways, I'm like, yeah, I finally get to drive it. Yeah, we took it around the block a couple times. Absolutely slush pit. Like, just the slipperiest, just terrible turbo 350 transmission ever. Dude, the thing was garbage. And I remember being absolutely heartbroken because I was like, where am I going to get another one? Now, I don't remember where I got my second turbo 350 trans. I think I might have actually gotten it from David, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. But we put a second one in, 3-speed automatic, simple trans, but we put a shift kit in, so it shifts a little snappier, you know? So you have a very basic setup in the car. You know, you have a turbo 350 transmission with a shift kit, you have small block Chevy 350, you know, relatively stock 350, with a little bit of a hefty cam in it. And then for my birthday one of the years, I think for my birthday of 2020, my dad got me a B&M shifter for B&M cable shifter for the automatic, and I still use it in the car. It is just a gorgeous shifter. I absolutely love the way it feels. And that's how the car was set up. And that's how it was set up for the longest time. For the entire summer, I worked as an apprentice at an auto body shop. And I drove that car 20 miles there, 20 miles back every single day. And it did it. It did it just fine. It was hot work because it was in the summer. You know, I'd be driving there early in the mornings when it's still cold, so I was cold in the car. And then on the way home, I'd be tank top and shorts, all the windows down. I had the kick panel vents open. I had the wing windows open, everything, just trying to keep me alive because it was so hot. But what did I care? I was driving a classic car daily. Started to get relatively noticed in just the area that I live in, and people started to recognize me, be like, oh, I know that car, or I know the kid that drives that car, you know? Whether that's a good thing or not, you don't know, because I might have been a menace sometimes. I have a loud car, I like to make noise, and I like to go fast. I got to drive the car all the time. And it really only started... This is how it works with classic cars, man. It only started to stop being reliable when I started to make it better. Hear me out here. The more I upgraded the car to make it a more reliable car, the less reliable I made it. I don't know how that works. I really don't. I put a different gauge cluster in the car at one point because I like the... Like how I said earlier, where I was mixing matching parts from other cars. I put like a 1963 Chevy Nova gauge cluster in because I like the 63 better than 62. And then I had no fuel gauge, no dummy lights, no speedometer. The speedometer never worked in the car, let me tell you. But anyways, you know, like I started to mess with the wiring in the car, and I was trying to make the wiring better, and then I made it worse. Or like, of course, you're a teenager, you want to listen to music, so a stock AM radio ain't going to help you, especially if it didn't work at the time. So then I started, you know, I added like a sound system. I put a Sony stereo in the glove box. You know, I wired in some like speakers in the kick panels. Heck, even for the longest time, I just ran a speaker up on the dash. You know, like a Bluetooth speaker. I just started to add to the car. I started to make it mine. You know, and oh man, it was fun. It really was. It was a great time, and then all of that ended very quickly. I made a lot of memories with the car. I had a lot of fun with the car. You know, I drove my friends around, drove my buddies around, and 2020 sucked for everybody, right? 2020 sucked for me. August of 2020, I think. Let's see, it's 2022 right now. Yeah, August of 2020. I'm driving by my house. I had been having a lot of low oil pressure issues with my motor, right? Which is also why the motor's trash now, because I didn't have the money or time to fix it, so I just kept band-aiding the problem with thicker oil, throwing new bearings in the motor, calling it good, with a god-awful rod knock. Like, let me tell you, terrible rod knock. But I had to ignore it because I had no money or finances, time, any of that. I didn't have what I needed to fix it, so I just band-aided it. Which, like I said, you start daily driving a classic car, eventually that's going to be bad for it. Here's my point. August of 2020. I'm taking a right-hand drive, or a right-hand turn at an intersection. Go halfway through the turn, throttle gets stuck. And I mean pin stuck, like full throttle. Car swerves the butt end out, swerves it back in. It's fully lost traction, then it grabs traction. And when it grabs traction, I'm pointed directly at oncoming traffic.